So I'm actually recording this segment. Actually, not even recording a segment, because I forgot to include the literal purpose of the book. Review though, like, nice. And random calls it extremely nice, cool. But anyways, The Mortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is about an African American woman who had cervical cancer, and her cells were taken from her without her permission, and these cells never died. So prior to this, like, human cells normally would like die when you tried to culture them after some time, but these are cancer cells, Henrietta Lacks, also known as HeLa cells, and they infinitely kept like spawning new generations, which has never been seen before in science. So through this, doctors and researchers launched a scientific revolution because of Henrietta's cells, and organized and originated a multi-billion-dollar industry. So now people could like develop more drugs for other types of chemotherapy or HPV, which is also a type of cancer, but you know what I mean. They were able to make a lot of progress in science because of it, but at the expense of going on like back on the principle of autonomy and informed consent, because Henrietta did not know. And the doctors at Johns Hopkins, you'll see. And more than 20 years later, 20 years, her children found out. 20 years. This multi-billion-dollar industry has been created, scientific progress has impacted all their lives, and they're just finding out that was their mom who like basically caused that. So, and this book is partially about how their kids' lives would never be the same. Actually, I say more than partially, but it would never be the same after that. Hello, and this is my book review of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This book right here by Rebecca Skloot. I have so many positive things to say about them, or to say about it, that I wrote them down. So I had to be organized because I could just ramble, but I'm gonna save all you guys time. But I also found some like freshman year diary entries, so maybe I'll read those too later. But they're kind of funny. I didn't read all of them. Maybe I would do it live, but I wrote them down in the Sloth Llama notebook here that is mostly empty. Okay. First off, we are starting with something that I really liked: the storytelling, narrated chronologically with occasional flashbacks that made perfect sense and provided awesome historical context. Yeah, loved that. Story starts out narrating the beginning of Henrietta's life and a little bit before that, just for historical context. But the actual, like, the author does a lot of interviewing with the people surrounding the life of Henrietta Lacks, and that takes place probably for about 10 years, so probably from about 1990 something to 2009. This book was published it went to press in 2009, I think, and it was published in 2010. So I think it's about 10 years total, but it's paced well, okay, that's whatever. It's paced super well. It kept my attention the whole time. I was super engaged. Terminology. So complex topics made easy to understand, but also reserving enough complexity to uphold the dignity and worth of Henrietta Lacks' contributions to the world of science. That's something I really appreciate, because they could have watered down, or Rebecca could have watered down a lot of topics to make it more digestible. She would have a PhD in some things like cellular related. I don't know. I didn't research her thesis specifically, but she was like very familiar with the field. And I think it's really important that she didn't like undermine the topics. Even when she was explaining them to the people in Henrietta's life, like she made sure to like uphold their dignity, and they were like explained to us like we are any other person, like you owe us kind of an, she wasn't owed them an explanation, but they were like, if we're going to agree to any interview, like we want you to talk to us like you would talk to anybody else, because at the time, like, still, I mean, not at the time, but like she's like the one white woman entering this like historically black town, and this historically black community that's been discriminated against for decades. So they weren't really sure what to expect when another white woman comes in or calls asking for an interview, because that's, you'll see more in the book, but just she did a great job at upholding the dignity and the worth of Henrietta's contributions to science through the complexities of it a little bit. Like, I think if they had downplayed it and like watered some topics down, I think it would have undermined the like significance of some of those events. And I think that that's not like the audience of this book. Like, if you were asking to learn about cellular respiration, like you would read a different book. So that's, or you could just do a Google search beforehand. But that's not what, I think it's almost like implied. Like, if you don't know what this is, you can do a Google search, but it's not my job to tell you, because this is about Henrietta and it's not about teaching you about science. And it's weird. I'm not explaining it super well, but like, okay, for this next point, I literally just wrote let her rip. Authenticity and accuracy. Rebecca Skloot, was so purposeful in the way that she went about like researching for this book, but I also love and appreciate how she was very open about mistakes she made or things that she could have done better or change in her research approaches. She went straight to the primary source. She was not afraid to really dive in and go find the root of these things that she was researching about, and also like challenge the opinions of other people she's researching about, and also just being continuously like, for example, one of Henrietta's daughters, Deborah, was particularly hard to reach. The book talks about her persisting to get information and connect with Deborah, but also just on a personal level. It wasn't just about like for the information. It was about like genuinely looking after Deborah as a person, not out of pity though, but like out of respect for Henrietta and what she was wanting to do. She knew that she had to learn more. It's like cultural competency in a sense, like, yeah. And she also was like, first thing in the book, basically, like one of the first things it talks about is like, there are things like grammatical errors or words that are not really supposed to be used in a certain context, but it's how the people of Clover or it's how the people of Henrietta family talked. That's one, reflective of the education they received. Two is important in preserving the authenticity of this work, and 3, it's just important when describing the narratives of these characters because that's just who they were, and I'm not trying to change their information and trying to change what was said and alter any meaning or anything behind it. It's not that big of a deal if they used a plural instead of a singular, like, meaning for a word. And I just think that was really just like awesome. I was like, yeah, even if you sometimes like people will like, even when you're like quoting somebody from like TV or something, a character says something like not grammatical, you know, like to put little brackets or parentheses or a missing word in there, and it feels in the way a lot of times, and you're like, oh, I know what they mean, and that's like she did not do that, and it like meant so much to how the characters were described, and you really felt like you knew. I mean, that's a bold statement come from like someone who's just reading the book, but like I felt like I totally like just could see and visualize and talk with the characters in this book. And I'm not like super good at visualizing, it's like in my brain, just seeing something, but like I really could. In the audiobook, they specifically use a different person to voice some of the characters in Henrietta's family. I think some of the like, mostly like a lot of the black characters, not out of like a segregation thing, but out of a like, this is African American vernacular English. This is how it's supposed to be represented. We're not gonna have to try somebody misrepresent this. And so they picked somebody specifically to read the audiobook in that way, and that was like a great choice and made it really, like, I think a lot better to listen to. Okay, so spoiler, this will be my favorite part. Skip ahead to whatever time is here. Yeah, if you don't want to hear it. But my favorite part was when Rebecca and Deborah were in the back rooms of Crownsville with trying to find Elsie's medical records, and they ended up finding literally a picture of her, and then just uncovering so much about like how black patients were treated in mental health facilities, or how they were even sent to them for the wrong reasons in the first place. The moment they like happened to find Elsie's pictures in there was just like gobsmacking, because nobody had seen Elsie for like a long time, if anybody even remembered seeing Elsie. So now the spoiler part is over. The afterward discussion, so important, like, oh my gosh. And it just really like brings it all home. It's about like bioethics and tissue rights activism and capitalism a little bit, and autonomy versus like what is most highest like valued thing in society. Like, it's not science, it's usually autonomy or like something that's not science, like, but it just like was such an interesting conversation. I like have to buy my own copy so I can like annotate this up again and read it, because like I need to know more about this and think about this heavily as someone who hopes to be going into medicine. Just interviewed for the OUH early assurance program today, so I think it went well. I mentioned this book to the interviewers, and they were all like, yeah, like they were like nodding, and I was like, yes. Oh, no, aside from the fact that it was just like a really good book, I just finished it, but like aside from the fact that it was a great book, like happy that my interviewers liked it too. So that is my book review. If you read it, let me know. I'd love to talk about it. And yeah, thanks for watching.